Thank you, Matthew, and thank you, Picton Rotary, for giving us this opportunity to talk to this pretty exciting new project. So Joe and I volunteer with South Shore Joint Initiative, or SSJI, and I'd like to start just by briefly looking at what the South Shore Joint Initiative does and what the Footpath project is, and then we'll get into some of the details. So if we could, oh, do we have some slides up? Nope. Maybe while we're waiting, I'll ask, does anyone spend time on the South Shore? Has anyone visited in the last little while? Long Point or anywhere between Point Peter and Point Traverse? Yeah. So yeah, some, okay. All right, so that is the area we will be talking about. So if we go to the next slide. There we go. So South Shore Joint Initiative, one of the things we are setting out to do is to permanently protect Prince Edward County South Shore. So the area from Point Peter to Point Traverse. And we're looking at it as an area where together biodiversity and people thrive. So I really want to stress that because that's very much what the Footpath project is about, is looking at how we can bring together conservation for a very, very special, rare area of biodiversity along the South Shore, and also bring people into the picture as well. What we have been learning is that when we close off our conservation areas from people, out of sight is out of mind. We don't care as much about them and we don't fight for them. So the Footpath project is looking to address that. So Joe and I, we are both really interested in nature, the health benefits of being in nature and in conservation. So the Footpath project is perfect for both of us. The idea of the Footpath is simple, but it's very powerful. It's to create a path on the South Shore that connects people to nature, and in doing so strengthens both our well-being and also strengthens conservation for the South Shore. So at this point, the Footpath really exists in the imaginations of our volunteers and our supporters, but even in these early planning stages, the project is grounded in a truth that is supported by science, and that is one of the best things you can do for your health is to be outside in nature. Okay, so next slide, I have a question for you. So I'd like you to think about how you feel when you are outside in nature. And if you could sum up that experience in one word, what would the word be? Relaxed. Let's say it's a beautiful day and it's not raining. Relaxed. What else? Calm. Free. Wonderment. Great. All right. Anything else? Do you notice none of those words are negative? They're all positives. And we've never done this exercise and heard a negative word. So let's look at that. What's really going on there? Why does being in nature make us feel so good? All right, today's talk is going to be about the health benefits of being in nature. Why is it good for us? Why does it make us feel good? Also, the connection between nature and conservation. There is a connection, and Joe will speak to that. Then we'll talk about the vision for the South Shore Footpath, where we are trying to bring together human health, our well-being, with conservation of the South Shore. Okay. Think back to when you were a kid. Do you remember your parents saying, go out and play and don't come home until the lights come on? Anybody remember that? How did you spend your time? Do you remember what you were doing? Baseball, exploring. You were probably out there getting into all kinds of things you maybe shouldn't have been doing. Exploring streams and creeks and ponds and climbing trees, and maybe when you got older you were picking berries or fishing or doing whatever, right? You were out there just all the time. Well, unbeknownst to people, all that we spent in nature when we were young was incredibly good for us, both in terms of our physical and our mental health, and this is based in science. However, If we go to the next slide, we are quickly losing our connection to nature, and it's going fast. There are lots of reasons that people stay indoors and keep their kids indoors. More people live in cities, so we're surrounded by suburbs. We have less access to natural space. Kids have more organized activities. You know, they're busy with things from the time they get home from school to the time they go to bed. Provincial parks like sandbanks are overrun. You have to book to go. You can't just pick up and go. Fear of ticks and lots of other things that keep people away from wild areas. So it's understandable. However, what that means is, go to the next slide, our connection to nature is dropping. One study has tracked the loss of nature from people's lives over the last 220 years. It's found that our connection to nature has dropped by around 60% since the 1800s. That's significant. The modeling predicts that we will have an ongoing extinction of experience, with future generations continuing to lose an awareness of nature because it's not present in our built-up neighborhoods, and we don't have a habit now as parents of passing on the value of being in nature to our kids. Other studies have found that parental nature connectedness, so parents being in nature and valuing that nature connection, is the strongest predictor of whether your kids will end up valuing time in nature as well. All right. It is taking a toll on our health. People are rarely getting out into natural settings. So there's a surprisingly wide body of research that is linking reduced contact to nature with mental and physical health impacts. It's not just a vague, nice to have. This is something that is really important to our well-being. So for example, we are finding that exposure to nature is associated, lower exposures is associated with higher rates of anxiety and depression. All right, lack of exposure to nature has negative impacts on our mental health, our cognitive functions, so our attention span, our working memory. It has physical impacts on blood pressure, heart health, your immune system, our sleep quality, and our social behavior. So our feelings of connectedness and meaning, and our social behavior in terms of kindness versus aggression. All of this has been scientifically studied. And it's not like lack of nature directly causes disease in a simple way. It's more that it removes a protective factor. So without it, our biological systems tend to drift in less healthy directions. And this has got really big consequences for you and me. So how does nature heal? Why does it make us feel good, and why is it good for us? Let's take a look at that. Stepping outdoors, even for a short time, changes everything. And really, it is healthcare at its most basic level to get out into nature. So I'm going to walk you through what nature does for your health. The first thing being boost the immune system. Nature isn't one thing that is acting on your body. It's a set of mechanisms that are reinforcing each other. And there is scientific evidence that these mechanisms are all beneficial. One of them is called phytoncides. So phytoncides are chemicals released by trees. They have antibacterial and antifungal qualities, and they help trees fight disease and ward off pests. Well, guess what? When we breathe air in a forest, we are breathing in phytoncides, and they work within the human body as well. Studies show that breathing them boosts the immune system for more than a week. So going for a walk in nature sets you up for the next week with a strengthened immune system. Phytoncides do this by boosting our natural killer cell activity. This is a type of immune cell that detects and destroys virus-infected cells, and it helps suppress early tumor formation. So just the smell of trees has health benefits. Being in nature also relieves stress. So today in Canada, about 80% of people live in cities. They're in a constant state of stress due to artificial overstimulation. And we all know, we were just talking before I came up here about what it's like to go back to Toronto now, and the lights and the people and the cars and construction and sirens. And 30 minutes later, you're like, okay, I'm ready to go. So we know anecdotally that when you spend time in nature, the sound of birds, the sight of water, the rhythm of your footsteps as you go for a walk are all very relaxing. So they help you let go of stress. And this is backed up by science too. So there are lots of studies. So I'm just picking and choosing from studies. There is a study where participants spent time in nature 3 times a week for 8 weeks. They called them nature pills. And participants provided their saliva samples before and after each of these experiences, and their levels of cortisol, which is your stress hormone, dropped by over 21% per hour that they were out walking in nature. So reducing stress, of course, will further strengthen your immune system. So you start to see how the picture builds. All of these things impact and build on our health. Okay. It relieves stress, cognitive function. So a study found that a single 40 to 50-minute walk in nature can temporarily improve memory and attention. And the effects aren't necessarily dramatic like a drug, but they are reliable and they are repeatable. Next one. And then mental health. We hear so much about a mental health crisis in the news now. So being in nature does show up mostly in clearing out stress and helping with mood, anxiety, and also reducing what they call rumination. So there was one study that involved brain imaging, and they showed after a 90-minute walk in nature, there's decreased activity in the area of the brain where you ruminate, which is when you get stuck on a stressful thought and you're spinning and spinning and spinning off it in it. If you go for a walk in nature, you actually will change your brain patterns so that you can break out of that negative circle of thinking. Okay. So this is really becoming a movement. And in Canada, we've adopted a complementary health intervention called Nature Prescriptions. It's been dubbed PARX. It was actually Parks Canada that initiated it. But it's a program where healthcare providers prescribe time in nature as part of your regular medical treatment. So it goes along with prescriptions and things. It's not like you won't need anything else in your life, but time in nature will help everything else. And if we look at my final slide here, I wanted to show you how many different kinds of Ontario organizations have signed up to support this program. So this is everything from our medical practitioners in hospitals and doctors' offices, mental health practitioners, we've got physiotherapy, pharmacists, all kinds of practitioners are now starting to prescribe time in nature and working together on this. So it's a big movement. Time in nature is incredibly important, and I'm going to turn it over to Joe now, who is going to talk a little bit more about how time in nature not only helps us, but it also helps conservation, and why we think the footpath is the perfect vehicle to support both.
Thanks, Lisa. I'm going to try to speak as fast as Lisa because we have a lot of material to get through. We can just move along here. We're going to move now to how nature exposure actually leads to conservation. Next slide, please. In the past, the thinking was that we can best protect nature by keeping people out, but that hasn't really worked very well. And there's lots of evidence to show why not. But those of you who have been to our South Shore will know that there's a number of abuses that happen there, dumping, illegal firing ranges, and just neglect and abuse. So the thinking today has moved, and this is not just here in the county, but internationally, from protecting nature from people to protecting nature with people. Next slide, please. And the scientific consensus is that connecting to nature strongly predicts positive environmental behaviors. And the term that's being coined quite repeatedly now is nature connectedness. And what we're finding is that when you connect people to nature, people start to appreciate it, they start to enjoy it. Over time, they start to love it. And just naturally, when you love something and you appreciate something, you want to protect it. You don't want to just see it go to abuse. And so that only makes sense. Next slide, please. And there are many benefits when it comes to nature connectedness. There's the enhanced well-being that Lisa just spoke to. There's pro-environmental or positive environmental benefits from people who are engaged in activities in nature, and they then want to get engaged in activities that protect the environment. And there's also social and community benefits. Nature connectedness can foster a sense of community and shared responsibility. Next slide. So what we're learning is that time in nature leads to better personal health and greater nature connectedness, which in turn leads to better environmental stewardship. All in all, this leads to better physical and environmental outcomes and a greater community health and connectedness. Connecting people to nature is one step to helping manage climate change. So you get people out and looking after our environment. And they're all interrelated. There really is no downside to nature connectedness and all the benefits that are achieved through that. Next slide. So this is where the South Shore footpath can play an important role. What we're seeing is that footpaths can provide access to wilderness and concentrate human impact. So by controlling where people go in a managed way, we can also control where they don't go. They can also function as wildlife corridors, and most importantly, deterring abuse. When you have regular managed use, there is a degree of monitoring that also takes place, and a sense that this area and this land is valued. It communicates that the land is cared for and someone is paying attention. There's no more, no one's looking, so no one cares kind of effect, which we see often. A footpath helps build community attachment. When people start using a place for walking and nature appreciation, they're more likely to support protection efforts. And it helps justify the protecting land. So footpath makes areas valuable to the public, which can build political and financial support for contribution. There's a growing movement around ecotourism. I've had a lot of experience walking on the Bruce Trail in Ontario here. In fact, I've completed all 905 kilometers of the Bruce Trail from end to end. But repeatedly, I've met people along the way who have come all the way to Canada from places like Germany and other countries around the world just to walk that path. And so every time I went to the Bruce Trail, we ended up paying for an Airbnb or a place to stay and restaurants and food. And so there's an economic value as well to having an attractive piece of property on you in the county. Next slide, please. So all of this serves as a backdrop and rationale for the Footpath project. As you know and heard from Lisa, the vision is to establish a permanent footpath across the South Shore where people and nature thrive. Today, I'm going to focus primarily on how we are designing to avoid ecological risks and what the footpath might look like in the future. Next slide. So this is the current South Shore. So we have Point Traverse on the far right on the east side and Point Peter on the left. And this red line is currently what you can walk quite easily. It's basically roadway, you know, along the roads at the South Shore. But our goal is to move south of those roads into the terrain that goes between the roads and the beach area, with some segments actually landing on the beach. But to be clear, we're not talking about a beach walk. You know, to walk the South Shore on the beach is not environmentally safe, and it's not physically safe because of the changing water levels and other barriers that occur there. And we're at different stages in different parts of the South Shore in our development of the footpath. Next slide, please. In designing the footpath, and Lisa mentioned we've been at this for 3 years now, and really we haven't got any footpath yet because most of that time has been spent doing research, doing our homework to make sure we understand the land, that we understand the challenges, the obstacles, the sensitive areas that need to be avoided, where there would be logical places to put a footpath, how to plan that path out. And we have a crew that has been spending almost every Sunday for the last 2 years doing GIS mapping of the South Shore and really making sure that we're going about this in a very thoughtful and methodical way. After we get to the point where we're going to lay some path, then we'll be looking at how to establish that path and how we go from there forward. And also how we build in points of interest. And as I said previously, areas to avoid, you know, sensitive areas and so forth. So next slide. We've studied all types of paths all over Ontario and in fact through Canada. And what we've established is that we want to look at a category 3 path, which is a trail designation. And it's designed as a single track width, developed or semi-developed trail in a natural environment or wilderness. In addition to the category 3, though, we've added some of principles of our own. Next slide. First of all, we're looking at this as a pedestrian-only path. This path will not be designed for bicycles, motorized vehicles, any of those types of things. And that's really all the path is being designed for. There'll be a narrow and single track corridor, and it's not intended for horseback, none of those extraneous things other than people. Next slide. Some of our other principles will be that there will be minimal impact, that we want to make sure that it's going to be not disruptive to the environment. We're looking at safety, how we make sure that it's built in a safe manner and that the users are safe, culturally respectful user experience, and finally, permission. We won't be going on any lands where we don't have permission. That's just all there is to it. We don't own any of the lands there. We have no intention of owning any of the lands on the South Shore. We are working in partnership with a number of landowners, and at different stages, but we will not go where we're not invited. Next slide. So maybe we'll just pop to the last slide for a minute, because I know we had a couple of questions before we got in. Are we up? Time's good. So if you look here at the South Shore and you look at the green areas, all the green areas represent what we consider to be public lands. So the Canadian Wildlife Services in the far right-hand side at Point Traverse, Monarch Point Conservation Park on the left-hand side at Point Peter, owned by the province. In between, we have sections owned by people like Nature Conservancy Canada, Ducks Unlimited, and other land trusts and conservation parks. And that's kind of where we've been focusing our initial efforts about working with those groups to look at how we could put footpaths on their properties. So far, Nature Conservancy Canada has a north-south trail that they've developed, and they've given us permission to use that and incorporate that trail into our trail planning, along with a new piece that would be connecting to adjacent properties. And we've just recently started a partnership with Ducks Unlimited, where they're allowing us to put a trail through their property. So we're working very, very slowly at this, as I said, very thoughtfully and very methodically. We're doing a lot of our homework and making sure that we don't do any damage as we move forward. And I'm going to leave it there. I don't know if that, does that give us 5 minutes for questions?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
I was just wondering, in designing the trail, because I know they did that in the bird sanctuary.